In this presentation, we'll be looking at the importance of evaluating sources, what needs to be evaluated when considering a source, and also how to develop an effective evaluation strategy. The first question, though, really should be, why is it important to critically evaluate any source that you come across and are considering including in your research? In including any source in an assignment, you need to have confidence in the quality of its content. Has it been well researched? Is it backed up with references, etc.? You need to make sure the information in the source is accurate. As I've mentioned, you need to make sure that any information in the source is supported by evidence. You also need to make sure the information is not outdated, it's current and it's got the most up-to-date information. In video 1, we looked at why it's important to give real careful consideration to any websites, any information that you've found by using a browser such as Google. Of course, there are a large number of resources, but there is no quality control on the web. So you need to make sure that you're doing your own evaluation, you're doing your own quality check. Using library resources, you've got far greater assurance of the quality of the information, but that doesn't mean that you should blindly use it without due consideration. You need to make sure the sources are going to be relevant to the research you're actually doing. In designing an evaluation strategy, you really need to be considering particular evaluation criteria, and we're going to look at 4 of those: authority, purpose, reliability, and currency, and you're going to apply these criteria to each source that you're considering using. The first criteria on the list, authority, you're really investigating the originator of the work so that you can determine, do they have the authority to write about the subject they're writing about? Do they have the qualifications? Do they have the knowledge and experience? The second criteria, purpose, is where you're exploring why the information was created. Why is it in existence? The third criteria is reliability. And in this criteria, you are determining the importance of the information to your own research. The last criteria is currency. And this is where you're determining how up-to-date, how timely the information is. You don't want any outdated, incorrect information seeping into your own work. So we're going to look at the first criteria, authority. And with each of these criteria, you're actually really asking a series of questions to answer and to evaluate that particular criteria. So for authority, you're asking questions like, who has written the work? The source should tell you. If it's an individual, well, what are their credentials, their qualifications? What's their background? They may very well give you a biography of the individual. Do they really know what they're talking about? Do they have the knowledge and do they have the expertise? If it's an organisation, publisher, sponsor even, are they well respected? Do they have a good reputation in the field of interest? For the second criteria, purpose, the questions you really should be asking are, why was the source created? Was it to share information, or perhaps was it to sell an idea or product? Does its creation have an economic value for the author or the publisher? Who is the intended audience? Is it for the academic community, or is it for a more general audience? The intended audience will very much have an effect on who published it, who wrote it, and the level of detail. In considering websites, there can be some clue to the purpose of the website, the web page, in its domain. For example, websites that have .ac or .edu mean that they are academic institutions, like Queen Margaret. .org is a non-governmental, non-profit making organisation such as Oxfam, as an example. .gov, government organisations, like the UK government, gov.uk. Commercial organisations will have .co or .com in their domain. And also you can determine the country of origin of the website, such as .uk or United Kingdom, .fr or France, and .au is Australia. There will be a greater chance with commercial organisations that they are trying to sell an idea or a product. The third criteria is reliability. And the questions that you should be asking to address this criteria are, well, what kind of information is included in the source? And you can only really find that out by actually reading the source itself. Is the content based on facts, or is it actually somebody's opinion? Is it balanced? Does it give you all sides of an argument? Or is there a distinct bias? Is it trying to sell you something, an idea, or a product? Are the arguments, the conclusions, the recommendations in it supported by evidence? And is that evidence actually recorded? You should also consider whether the source has gone through some quality control, perhaps peer review, that would maybe give you extra assurance of the quality of its content. You perhaps might also want to find out if the information has been verified by another source, perhaps in another journal article, for example. That might lead you to have greater confidence in the source itself. If it's a web page, are the links within, do they work? And with any source, are there any spelling or grammatical errors that might make you question the quality, the reliability of the source itself? The final criteria, currency, well, you should really be asking questions like, well, how recent is the information? When was the source published? Is the information outdated? Is there an updated version available? And looking at your own research question, is the information provided in the source actually going to be current enough for your own needs? We're now going to look at two examples to see how we might start applying the criteria, the questions, to actually evaluate, to assess if I might want to use the information or not. In this first example, I'm not familiar with either the website or the author, so I would need to try and find out more about the website itself and about the author. Perhaps the website has a biography of the author or an about section about the purpose of the website and why it's been created. Perhaps I could also carry out a Google search on the author to see who they are. What are their qualifications? What are their knowledge and experience? From its domain and from the fact there are lots of advertisements in the web page would lead me to think it's a commercial site. So I need to find out its aims and objectives so I can help to determine if it's trying to persuade me of something. Is it trying to sell a product, an idea, for example? And therefore, is the information contained in the web page biased? It doesn't mean that I'm going to instantly dismiss the article. I need to investigate, I need to find out more about it before I come to a decision. In the second example, I know the organisation and I know that I can trust in its expertise to provide accurate medical and health-related information. However, that doesn't mean that I'm going to blindly accept the information without evaluating it first. I need to determine if the source is actually going to be relevant for my own research. For example, I need to determine its intended audience. If it was written for the general public, for general information, I need to decide if the information is detailed enough for my own purposes. Is it actually going to assist my research, my assignment? I also need to determine if it contains the most up-to-date information. For example, can I find out when it was last updated? Was the update a recent one? Because what I don't want to include is outdated data into my own work. So these are the sort of questions I need to be asking of every source when deciding whether to incorporate it into my own research. So what have we looked at in this recording? We've looked at why evaluating sources are so important. We've looked at what actually needs to be evaluated and the questions and criteria that you're going to need to consider. And finally, we've also looked at how to develop an effective evaluation strategy.